Okay, guys, welcome back. So yesterday we started with a new topic. Object-oriented programming. Main idea here is not about the language. It's about how we use the language. You know how to do programs, multiple methods, conditions, loops, and instructions. And obviously you need to learn more instructions from the libraries. That is one thing. Second thing, when you have problems, like yesterday I showed you the example with the video game. You have this video game and you have several elements that are used the same, and you need to duplicate those elements. I showed you the drones. So you need 20 drones, 100 drones, and all of them are going to have the same information. Easy example. All of you have worked in some moment with an Excel data sheet. You have tables with information for almost everything. If we think about your grades, you can visualize that for every single class that you take, for Canvas, every time that you access, there is something like your name in some place, your ID, maybe your grade. And I am going to play with these three variables or three columns, but you can continue, right? Information. Now, you have that information for every single row in a table. And the number of rows can increase, right? The information that you put in every single row represent one entity, one thing, like one student. And the next row, well, another student, and so on. But the same idea apply for everything, for every entity. Now, we provide a name, a fancy name for these things. Those are going to be objects. We're going to use the term object or entity to define anything. A person is an object. A drone in the video game is an object. The TV is an object. The computer is an object. The mouse is an object. And you can continue. An object is this row in this kind of table. I described this example yesterday. Now, so far, if you use what we learned in the previous 4 weeks, and I asked you to do a program that is able to handle the information that I am showing you in this table, so far, if you look this, well, you know that you need classes. And I am confident that you're going to start with, well, you are asking me to create a program. That program is going to be a class. Whatever name that you want. And you need main, and you need variables. Let's talk about the variables, because that is the important thing here. That is going to be our connection. If I ask you for the variables that I need in this program in order to handle this name and maybe this name and this ID and this ID and this grade and this other grade and so on, well, the easy solution with the information that we have so far is like, well, We need the strings for the names. And maybe you're going to start with, well, we need a name 1 and a name 2. So name 1, name 2. And if I give you more rows, you're going to continue here. If you think about the ID, maybe integer, following the same idea, ID1, ID2, and more rows, more variables. Similar with the grades. What is the problem? I can solve the problem here. I can do the program. The problem is I have too many variables. Think about it. 3 variables per row, 10 rows, 100 rows. There are going to be a lot of variables. And think about every single one with a name. Name 1, name 2, name 3. What I am going to have, name 20, name 25, and so on, is going to be huge. This is a problem. It's a problem because you are going to forget which name corresponds with which ID or which grade. It's very easy to make mistakes. It's very easy to print the name 1 with the ID 2, maybe with the grade 11. This is a bad idea. This is a problem. When you need to handle a lot of information, using only variables can become problematic. Can be done. You can do it. It's just not a good idea to follow this approach. Okay, what is the approach that we need here? What could be a good solution here? The good solution for these kind of problems in which you need to handle more information. And in particular, you need to put together the information that correspond to one thing, one object. Well, it's object-oriented programming. What I do with object-oriented programming in this kind of problems? Well, in object-oriented programming, number 1, you do more than one class. That is something that we reviewed yesterday, remember? You do more than one class, and usually the idea is you are going to have one class, and I am going to keep the name. And that one, that class, is going to have your main. Main, remember, the leader, the one that control the program, can be a member in one particular class. But I am going to do another class. One class to create a template for the information that I want to store for several different entities. Think about this class like one class that is going to define this, the headers of the table. The class is going to have this, the definition of those columns. And then I am going to be able to create rows, objects, using the class. In this case, I am going to define a class that is going to help me to put together name, ID, and grade. Notice that I am just defining 3 variables, not all the variables that I defined here before with the previous approach. Obviously, for my variables, I need data types. I choose the data types that I think are better for the values. You know the data types. You can choose any data type. Now, the first thing that I am going to do is, now that I am working with this object-oriented approach, I am going to delete the static word. And I am going to talk more about that today. But number one, when you start creating classes for this approach, object-oriented, the first thing that is going to happen is goodbye to static. So now my variables can be used public, the type, and the name, no static. Obviously, I can have here in my class not only the variables, methods, methods for calculate the grade, methods for change the name, methods for review the ID, whatever. I can put actions there. Next step. What do I do to connect this class, the one that have the main, and this one, the name, the one that have the information? Well, the only thing that we need to do is to use a new keyword, a new instruction that is going to help us to connect them in a new particular way. What is that way? We're going to use this one as a template to create a row in the table, to create an object. Something that we reviewed yesterday. I need this word, new. New is the word that we're going to use to create objects, rows in my table. That new is going to have the following elements. The object need to have a name. Yesterday I used John, Jane. You can use whatever. You can use X if you want. So I can think about this first row, this first guy here as X, and the second one can be Y. You can use the names that you want. It's a name for an identifier. Before, we need a type. Usually, we have been using integers, float, characters, and so on. What we are going to do in object-oriented programming is to use this, the name of a class that we define as the type for something. So I can define X, and the type for X can be student. Student. In this case, the name that I am using for my class here, equal new. And after new, again, the name of the class. Think about this. we are confirming to the computer, I want a variable. It's going to be a student. Yes, a new student. Left and right, we put the name of the class. So there is no doubt what do we want. And finally, parentheses and semicolon. The semicolon, you know, end of the instruction. The parentheses, we're going to talk more about it. But for now, just help me with the parentheses. And with that, you complete the line, the instruction. You can use table also. However, I am not using table because table do not have anything. If you notice in my class table, I do not have variables and I do not have methods, only the main. So for using the main, I do not need this new thing. I do not need to create an object table in order to run the main. If I put more variables, if I put methods here in table, yes, you can do also table, something, equal, new table. Similar idea could apply. For now, what I want is students, rows here. So what I tell the computer is, computer, right now, I need these students. If you think about it, this table is really like a group, 110, 240, 315. I can do something like what you are describing in the chat to create groups. That could be completely fine. And we're going to do something like that in the next weeks. So far, at this point, table is almost empty. I am not going to create an object table. The only thing that I am creating is object students. And I just create one X. The main idea here is after I do this, now I can put X dot, and this X has all these variables. What I did was to create the row, but that row has all the columns that I defined in the class. So you have something like X name. Obviously, you have access to X ID, and you can assign a value, and you have something like X dot grade. Just like that. Now, if you want another row, another student, I mentioned the name Y, new student, is my second row, my second student. And I can do Y name, and that is a variable that is completely different from X name. I can do Y ID, and I can do Y grade. What I want you to notice is right now, in this example, I have 6 variables, but hopefully you agree with me that this and this is better, is clear, is everything in a capsule, easy to understand than this example here with several variables, the same number of variables, 6, but use every single thing with a different name and everything individual. All these names versus something like this, clean, easy to read, encapsulated like your table in a spreadsheet. We're going to do that. Like you notice that these two lines are kind of the same. And you are thinking like, what if we put that instruction in a for loop? You can create several students. Like for instance, I know that the size of my class is 100. I can do a loop, and inside of the loop, I can create 100 students. And you can imagine that instead of having all these lines 100 times, the only thing that you need to do is to put here a for, close the for, and you can have as many students as you want, and all of them are going to have the variables that you define in a different place, in a different class. This is object-oriented programming. Not sure what you did today with the lab. You should be working with loops and conditions, not objects yet. But good. So my point, guys, we continue with the same language. But yesterday, we moved a level up. And that movement is now we need more variables, a lot of more. And we need to put those variables in a specific place, just because we want to write a program, a document that is easy to read. And our approach is going to be object-oriented programming. What is this object-oriented programming? Do a program using objects. What are the objects? Anything in the world is an object. We teach the computer what that object is, like what is a student right now, by creating classes. Think about your video game. Every single element in a game is a class. Every single element in Canvas is a class. And you use those classes to define objects. In a video game, if you have zombies or drones or whatever, that program have a class zombie, a class drone, a class whatever. And then when you're playing and you have 20 of those, 20 objects from the class, whatever. Canvas, I have a list of all my students. Canvas, the software, have a class student. That class student has one variable for every single thing that I want to record. You're grading the labs, you're grading the quizzes, whatever. There is a class defining that. And for every single student that enroll in my class, Canvas create an object that represents that student. That is programming. Good news for a shooter game. Most of the classes already exist. Think about this. Do you know software that helps you to create video games? It's very easy to install a piece of software, Unity, Red Engine, whatever, that basically you can create a video game by putting things together. Why? Because the classes already exist. And the only thing that you do as a developer of a video game is to create objects, new, from those classes. Again, you never do software alone. Most of the time, what you do is what I am doing here in table, creating objects. But the classes that define those objects already exist. Someone else defined those classes. Whatever are you shooting in the game, again, the drones, the zombies, or whatever, that classes already exist. The only thing that you need to do is to create an object and put that object in a particular position in your game, or create 20 or 100. In terms of programming, the level of difficulty is the same. As you notice, 1 or 2, same difficulty, copy paste. The only thing, I need to put a different name. We can put this in a loop. My only concern, change the name. We need to review arrays. Arrays are going to be our solution for the names, but it's coming. Yeah, Here, remember, spaces are used for you to make this easy to read. I put the spaces in the source code that I shared with you. Here, I am trying to do spaces, but if you do not use spaces at all, if you put everything together, well, obviously here you need a space because there are two words, but for the equal, for the parentheses, for the semicolon, no spaces and everything is fine. A space here is mandatory, student and X. Here is mandatory, new, one word, and student. Those are the only two spaces like mandatory. The others with the symbols, the computer understands that symbols and words are separate. Makes sense? And hopefully, yes. Now, it's like no static, static. I want to talk today about our friend static. Finally, I promised this in the week 1. Finally, we're here talking about static. Yesterday I told you static, the meaning of a static is one and only one. You can think about that. When you read static, that is the meaning. Is this thing is static, the meaning is this thing is special, is unique, is one and only one. Read my program. The only place in which I use static is for the main. The main, one and only one. And you know now that that is true. Main, one and only one in the full program. Why I removed this name, ID, and grade? Why I didn't put a static for them? Because I want them for X, I want them for Y, and if I create more objects, I want all of them to have name, grade, and ID. I do not want grade, name, or ID to be static. I do not want those variables to be unique. I need them to be columns in a table. I need them to exist for every single row, for every single object that I create from that class. Yes, that is a fancy name for this. I need copies for that variables. So now that you read this, it's like, oh, static, unique. No static, those are going to be objects, clones, copies. Now, I show you main, but that is easy. You need to remember that main always have static. What happened with other methods and other variables? And what happened if I have in one single class things that are statics and things that are not static? What happens if I make a combination of things statics and not static, unique or not unique? What is going to happen? Well, it's going to be interesting. So let's see. Static. You can use a static with variables, global variables. You can use a static with methods. All your programs previous week are like this: global variable, static, method, static. Now you learned yesterday that you can eliminate the static from the variables, also from the methods. If you have opportunity to run the source code that I showed you yesterday, the one in which the student have this method say hello and something else, the methods do not have a static because I want each method to be available with each student. John, Jane, now with X and Y. Anyway, static, unique, no objects. Without the static, objects, not unique. They are going to be copies. They are going to exist in every single object from the class. So far, okay, it's like there is this world in which I have a static, and there is another one in which I do not use static. If we keep them separated, everything is fine. But, question in the chat, well, method to be global. Well, the methods are always global. I mean, they are inside of the class, but they cannot be inside of another method. Maybe the name is when you want the method to be unique, when you want the method to be the same for every single element in the class. And I am going to show you an example using the next slide, or in a couple of slides. You can use the method in another class, both with a static or without the static. Let me show you. So if we keep things separated, we already work with this. What I want to do is to show you an example with the things separate, but also I want to mix them, make things interesting. So, rules. And for now, just take note of the rules because I need you to remember these rules. Easy. Regarding the methods, if you have a method that do not have the keyword static, and I am going to use the name non-static methods. If you have a method that is not static, that one can use both static and non-static variables. Why? That is the rule. Going back here, do I have a non-static method in this example? Yes, right? This say hello here is a non-static method. How do you know that it's a non-static method? Because the keyword static is not there. So, question in your exam. This method say hello can use variable 2, like variable 2 equal 1? Yes or no? I mean, like, okay, variable 2 is static or non-static? Non-static. Here, a non-static method can use a non-static variable? And the answer is yes, obviously, right? Both are outside of this keyword static. So I can do this. Now, what about variable 1 equals 0? The same question. Can I use variable 1 inside of the method say hello? We go back to the rule. It's like, okay, say hello is a non-static method. Variable 1, according with this definition, is a static variable. So a non-static method can use a static variable. And the answer is yes. Okay, so in general, if you have a method and the method is non-static, he can use whatever he wants. The method can use static or non-static variables. I am going to show you the difference, but again, the rule right now, used for the compiler, non-static method can use whatever you want. What about static methods? A static method, only static variables. A static method, only static variables. Do you remember that we play with the static methods? And then I asked you, put the static also to the variables. This is the reason. Because if I do not ask you to put a static to your variables, your methods, because your methods were static, will not have been able to use the variables. Anyway, say hello all. This one is static. So inside of this method, can I use variable one? Static method, static variable, fine. Can I use variable two, this one, inside of say hello all? If you try to do this, your compiler is going to tell you error. This is not going to compile. So basically the only thing that you need to remember is do not use static variables. Do not use static variables inside of static methods. That is the important rule. Every other thing, this one, this one, this one, are okay. But if you have a variable that do not have the static keyword, you cannot use that variable in a method that have the static keyword. Again, in all the programs that you have done in the previous 4 weeks, if I do not ask you to put static to the global variables, you cannot use those variables inside of the static methods that you create. That is the important rule that I need you to remember for the compiler. If you forget, compilation error, and the compiler is going to tell you exactly that. Non-static variable cannot be used inside of a static method. And now you know what they are talking about. Good. So, fancy names. In some books on the internet, when you read this, class variable, static variable, both things are the same. Fancy names for the same idea. Here, I have variable one, a static variable. Variable two, non-static variable. But for some people, this static, non-static is like, I got confused. Some people is going to use, this one is a class variable, which means it's a static variable. This one, the fancy name, is an attribute or an object variable or a non-static variable. Depending on the book, depending on your source, those are the names that are used. Static variable, class variable, non-static variable, object variable, or attribute. Just remember that, so if you read any of these, you will know, okay, that is a fancy name for something that you already know. Good. Can you change? Yes, you can. But let me show you the consequences. Any variable can be static or non-static, but I need to show you what is the difference when you are running your program. So I'm going to show you in the next example. So object variable, attribute, instance variable, names for the non-static. Now, the important thing here is, good, the rules are fine, but tell me, what is the difference between making a variable static or non-static? Good. Okay. For you, this is exactly what I described before. That is the only case that cannot happen. You cannot use in a static method a non-static variable. Now, I want to do a program, and I am going to have in my program one class, and I am going to play with this student. Inside of this class, I am going to have two variables. One is going to be public, int. One static variable and one non-static variable. Grade A, grade B. Both are integers. Use static or not. That's it. Now, I am going to do the same with a particular method. Lesson number 1. You can create a class, and your class can have static and non-static variables. Your class can have static and non-static methods. It is possible. Obviously, your question right now is, what is the difference? Well, difference number 1, the rules that you described, right? I am going to play with that. But one static variable, one static method. So far, nothing special. My class student. Can I use grade A inside of the method do this? Can I use grade A here? Yes or no? Question in your exam. The variable that is not static can be used inside of the method that is static? No. Any other question, any other situation can be done. The only one that you cannot do is grade A inside of the method do this. That is the only thing that is not allowed according with the rules that we described as well. It could be a good idea, but it depends on the problem that you are solving. Let me show you. So remember this student. Just keep this image in your mind. I am going to use this class below. So I have this class student. Good, looks fine. Now I am going to create another class, right? I can use whatever name I want. The only thing that I am going to put here my main method. I can ask you now why I am using static with the main method? Because it's unique, because there is one and only one. That is the reason, because this one needs to have the static. Now, moving forward, let's see. Step number 1. I would like to use here in my classroom, I would like to put in this variable here, grade B, I need to store a number. Grade B equal 100. As you can imagine, grade B is not a variable in this class. Therefore, I need to tell the computer where is grade B. And I do that with the dot here, and I need to add something here, something before the name of the variable. Obviously, I would like to put something, a value in grade A. And as you can imagine, grade A is not in this class, so I need to tell the computer where grade A exists. I need to put something here, right? What do I need to add here and here in order to have access to the variables? Well, we already did something like this before, remember? The easy one. If your variable is a static variable, remember, a static variable or class variable. Grade A is static variable, class variable. What do you think we put for a class variable here in order to have access? The name of the class, right? Do you remember math.py? If you have a static variable and you want to use that static variable in another class, we already did this. Name of the class dot name of the variable. That is easy. Now, following the same idea, I have this method, do this, and is also static. I can call the method, do this, parentheses, but the method is not in this class. The method is in another class. So I need to put here something to tell the computer where the method is. Do you remember what we did with the class math? What we put there? The name of the class, remember? If my method is static, you put the name of the class dot the name of the method or the name of the class dot the name of the variable, and you have access. You have been doing this. The only thing that I want is to be sure that you remember name of the class to access anything that is static, anything that is unique. Is unique inside of the class. So you ask for that thing, and it's the only one. It's like, think about this. In a classroom, you have one and only one professor. So if someone arrives and asks for the instructor, the professor, it's a static variable. There is no more than one option. It's unique, static. Name of the class, name of the variable or the method, and that's it. You have access. For you, all the methods in the class math are static, yes or no? The method pow, square root, sine, cosine, all of those methods are static. And the answer is yes. How do you know? Because in order to access those methods, you put the name of the class before. And that means that they are methods or variables for the class, class method, class variables, static, class, static. Now, this is easy because you already know it. What happened with the others? What happened with this grade A? What happened with do that? Do that. A. They are not static. If you put here the name of the class and you try to use grade A, or here you put the name of the class and you try to do that, you get errors. Your compiler is going to tell you this is wrong. You cannot put the name of the class before a method or a variable that are not static. Do you remember what is the name of that variable? Object variable, right? Non-static variable, object variable. So what do we need to put here and here? For class variables, the name of the class. For object variables or attributes or instant variables, the name of an object. So the name of an object. X. Okay, but that X is kind of a new name. What is that? Ah, well, computer, X is going to be a new object. Remember, new is for creating new objects. Okay, but you need to tell me not one, but twice which class I am going to use to create your object. You are going to use the class student. Yes, I am sure, the class student. I am going to create an object, X, from the class student. And then you're going to be able to use grade A and do that with that student X. Now, moreover, I can create another student, Y, new student, and then I can use Y, grade A equal 70, Y, do that, the method. For these two, I do not have any other option. Use the name of the class. For the objects, I can use the variable with any new object that I create. Yes, I put the name of the class here and here because the class is the type for the variable. Just like before I use int, double, float, and so on. Remember, the type for the variable go before the name of the variable. In this case, the type for the variable is the name of the class. Classes are data types. And do you remember string? Uppercase is a class. We need to talk more about that, but next week. The class go before the name of the variable to establish the type. The type is a class. And also the class go after the new because a particular thing that we are doing. So far, just believe me, 2 times the name of the class, always. Now, you can be thinking like, good, static, if I want to access, I use the name of the class. Non-static, if I want to access, I need to create an object. 2 different choices. You use during 4 weeks the option A, the static one, the name of the class. And just yesterday, you learned about this, create an object, and this use non-static methods and non-static variables. And now you get an idea, the difference in terms of programming. But you know what? The important thing here is what is happening inside of the memory of the computer. What is really the difference inside of the computer between my option A and my option B. What is the difference between having objects or not? Take a look to this and try to remember grade A, grade B, and X and Y. Just remember what is X, Y, grade B, grade A. In the memory, something that I need you to remember is what we did right now was to create two objects. And usually you represent this object with circles used to represent this encapsulation, things that are together. I create two objects. Do you remember the names that I use for those objects? Great, no. X and Y? Yesterday, Jane and John, yes. Right now in this program, could you agree with me? X and Y? You can use any name that you want. Just X is like this circle, and Y is my other circle. Now, what do we have inside of those circles? Well, do you remember my example with the table and the columns and the rows? What do I have inside of this circle for X? Well, X is an object, and it's an object from the class student. Inside of the student, I define grade A and grade B. Good? Grade A is not static, is not unique. There is a variable grade A inside of the object X. And that is the reason because I can do X grade A equal to whatever, because that whatever is going to go to that box. There is another variable grade A inside of the object Y. And that is the reason because I can do Y. And that 70 is going to be there. And if I continue creating objects, each object is going to have inside this variable A, so I can have a different value for those variables A's inside of each different object, just like you have a different value for every row in a single column. Those are the non-static variables. What happens when you put a static to a variable? In this example, I put a static to this variable B. Remember, grade B, static. Static, one and only one, unique. That one is grade B. You put a box outside of the objects. It doesn't matter how many objects you create. Always, 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 there is going to be one and only one variable grade B. Always. Only one. And that is the reason because if you try to do X dot grade B, it's going to be an error because grade B is not inside of X, is not inside of Y. If you want to use grade B, what you need to put is the name of the class because, well, that is the name of the file that is defining the variable, and then you can put something inside, but it's unique. Even though it's inside of the class student, when you create the objects, that variable is not going to be part of the cloning process. It's a variable that is there that you can use as you did before, but that one is not going to be replicated. It can be changed, yes, and I am going to show you an example of that. Just be aware, because it's only one, it doesn't matter who changed the variable, but the only value that you're going to have is the last one. Remember what happened when we change the value of a variable, right? Only the last one is the one that is going to be there. How many variables do I have? In the class, I create two variables. Just to give you the example, I create this variable A and B. One static, one non-static. But I need you to notice the difference. I can create objects, and the objects are created in another class, this one, the one that have the main. And if here I create, and this is a question in your exam, if I create 100 objects here, copy paste or a loop, whatever, but if I create 100 objects, can you tell me how many variables grade A I am going to have in the memory? 100 objects, students, how many variables grade A I am going to have? How many variables grade A do I have per object? And if I have 100 objects, yes, 100. I create two objects here. And as you notice, 1, 2, grade A. If I create 100 objects, 100 variables grade A, 1 per object, 1 inside of each circle, 1 per object, 100 in total. The other question, tell me, if I create 100 objects from the class student, how many variables grade B I am going to have in the memory? Grade B, 1. Question in your exam, I promise. How many variables A, how many variables B? How many variables when the variable is static? How many variables when the variable is not static? Hopefully it's clear why 100 A's, grade A. Why only 1 and only 1, grade B? That is the function of the keyword static. For the variables, for the methods, the same principle. So you are doing a program. What do you want? Think about a video game. In a video game, you want to have a variable speed, and speed, you have a different speed for every single different car in the video game. Your variable speed inside of the class car is static or non-static? Is an object variable or is a class variable? Speed in the class car. Fully agree. Speed in the class car, I think makes sense that the speed is going to be different for every single car that I create. So it makes sense that speed is an object variable, therefore non-static. Think about your video game, and you have this variable that basically is going to store a Boolean variable, is raining or is not raining. Boolean variable, raining. Do we need a variable is raining or whatever, is hot or is cold? I don't know, the weather. For every single car? Probably not, right? It's going to be the same weather in the full video game. Students. Inside of the class student, I have grade. Static or non-static? Final grade. Hopefully you agree non-static, right? You do not want to have the same grade everyone. So each student have a particular grade. What about bonus points? Class student, and I want to have or define bonus points. Do I need a bonus points variable per student, or I can have these bonus points static? Hopefully you agree with me that bonus point can be static just because that is fair. Bonus point is the same for everyone. Doesn't matter how many students do I have, doesn't matter who is the student, the bonus point should be the same. Yes, damage is a non-static variable. That is the point. And that is the reason because you can have these enemies, the drones, the zombies, or whatever, and each of them have a different damage because it's a different value in the variable damage inside of the class, drone, zombie, or whatever, and all of them change. But it's easy to have one and only one variable damage in the class enemy instead of doing the thing that I mentioned in my previous example, like damage 1, damage 2, damage object 3, damage drone, damage, it's only one. And you create as many objects as you need. And those objects inside have the variables that you define, the object variables. Makes sense, guys? This is the reason because we have static and non-static. This is the reason because I asked you to have a static for everything before, because we were not working with objects. We never used new before. So I needed for you to use a static. So you just use the name of the class. Now, because we're going to start working with objects, we can start working with static methods or non-static methods, and the same with the variables. Good? Never. The main, always static. That is a rule. Always static. And because the main is static, if you want to put, like here, a variable, like int x, a global variable in this class, and you want this variable to be used here inside of the main is static. If you create this variable and try to use the variable in the main, you receive an error. A static method cannot use a non-static variable. Always, 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 if you want to have global variables in the class that have the main, and you want to use that variable inside of the main, because the main is static, you need to make the variable static. The rule that I just described for you. Hopefully now makes sense. Good? Okay. So quickly, one more thing that I want to review with you today. I am back with John and Jane. Hopefully now, this is one file, this is another file. How many class variables do I have in my class student? Again, kind of question for your exam. How many class variables do I have in a student? Tricky question. Class variables. Which ones are the class variables? And it's tricky because you can think, well, the class is a student and there are two variables. In the class student, you have two variables. No. Class variables are the static ones. Yeah, I know, it's tricky, but please check that. So the answer, as you mentioned in the chat, 0. There are no class variables in the class student. But you have two variables. They are not class variables. They are object variables or attributes or instant variables because they are not static. Yeah, I know. That is the reason because I am asking these questions right now, because they are tricky. I know they are connected with the concept that I reviewed before, and I need you to memorize those concepts, please. So, not class variables, because the class variables are the static one. And it's not because I want to be tricky, but it's because you're going to read that in a book, and I need to be sure that you're going to understand those books. So, yeah. Okay, so right now, 100% clear every single line in this example. Is anything in this example that right now is like, what is happening there? Hopefully not. Hopefully it's 100% clear. Yes? Green, red? Okay, at least one yes, no no? Okay, moving forward. One more thing, guys, for today. I am sure that you notice that sometimes I am using methods, and the only thing that I do is to call the method. I put the name of the method with an object or with a class, whatever, and that's it. And I described yesterday what happened when you call a method, this jumping and then jump back. So this is familiar for you. However, sometimes something that we have done is this call a method, and for some reason we use a variable to store something that that method give to you. And I am sure that you remember this double x equal math sqrt. It's like somehow I told you that this is a class, this is a method, and just because you believe me, it's like, yeah, and this one is going to put the square root, one result inside of this variable. Right? Similar with G option pane, we're using this string and then we catch the value inside of the variable, whatever the G option pane give us, return to us. And in this point, I want to show you this. So far, with the static or without the static, something that I ask you to do is this word, void. Every single method that you have created so far is void. When you put void there, what you are doing is a method like these examples, a method that you can call, just like in my example yesterday that I was calling all these methods in the quiz, grade the quiz, ask for the answer, whatever. When I want a method, and the only thing that I want to do is to order that method to run, I can use void, the one that I asked you to use. Now, if you want your method to do something like the math methods or the G option pane method or something like this, I want a method that I can call the method run, but when the method return, I want that method to bring me back something. Think about, you call the method is going to do something, but you want that method to give you something when that method, the invocation, the calling of the method finish, bring something to you, give something to you, like this math sqrt. I am calling the method sqrt, but I want that method to give me the result of the square root. You call the G option pane show input dialog. I want to run that method, but when the method finish, when the dialog box close, I want to have back whatever the user put in the box. I want something. When you want something back, this void, you can replace void. Void means empty. Empty what? When the method returns, the hands of the method are empty. The method do not bring you back a gift. That is void, empty. You can change that and you can put here any type that you want. And basically you are telling the method that that method needs to give you back something. Something, an integer, something, a double, something, a char, something. You define here what is that something. Show me an example. Yes, I am going to show you examples. So you remember, so far, methods, public. I need to tell you what is the meaning of private yet, but you can imagine. Static. Now static is optional. You can put static or not. Then a type. We have been using void. Starting today, I am telling you, you can put not only void, but any other type. I am going to review with you the consequences. Name of the method, something inside of parentheses that we still need to review, and then the body, the thing inside of the curly brackets. We need to talk more about this, and we need to talk a little bit about private. But at least my promise about talking about static, check, and void is the next thing. So one example, and I would like to ask you to copy paste this and run it, but use an introduction here. I have here a class student. My class student. How many class variables do I have? Now we are understanding, right? One static class, one static variable, one class variable. How many attributes? Attribute, object variable. Makes sense. By the way, public is default. If you do not put public, by default, it's like public is there. So do not be afraid that some of my programs do not have public. You can add the public. It's just the default word there. So methods, one method, two methods, three methods, four methods, five methods. Did you notice say hello is void? Did you notice say hello in is void? Draw something is void. Those methods comes from the program that you copy paste yesterday. But now I create this one double and this one int. Consequences. If you change that part of the method and instead of void, you use something else, in that moment, you have the responsibility to put the instruction return inside of your method. What? Yes. If your method is void, your method is not going to bring you back anything. You put void, that's it. But if you put something different, like int, char, or whatever, you need to add the instruction return in some place inside of the curly bracket, because that return is the one that is going to give you back what you are asking for. For instance, in my example here, I have a method, give me a number. And for that method, I change the void and I put double. Good? I can call that method and I can have a variable double with whatever name I want. and I can make that variable equal to calling the method, because the method is going to give me back what? What I put here in the return. It's going to give me back, in this case, x. What is the value of x? The one that I defined before, math.random times 100. In the other example, return an integer. When I call this, add this number, return an integer, is going to return the result of this a plus b. Notice what is happening with say hello. What is happening with say hello in. But what is happening with those methods that do not have the void? Variable x, double, equal, John give me a number. Variable y, equal, Jane, add these two numbers. I can call a method and the method can return to me a value with the keyword return and replacing the void for something else. Hopefully makes sense. Homework for you, please. This program with this program, copy paste, practice, notice what is happening, and tomorrow we continue talking about this, the return and the different types, with more examples and new topics. Good? Any question?
Professor, I had a question.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to word it, but it was when you were asking about the students, and it was, the answer was none, and it wasn't 2.
Where?
You were talking about it like 15 minutes ago, and you asked if like there was variables, but it was none, it was 0.
Maybe in one of the examples with a class here, I think, there. I think my question was for the class student, how many class variables, right?
Yeah.
And my point was the following. I need you to remember that we have variables inside of classes, right? I mean, we always put these variables inside of classes, the global variables. And there are 2 classifications for those variables. The variables that are globals, the variables that exist inside of the class. There are 2 types. There are attributes that are object variable, that is the name, or instance variable. And I am basically listing all the different options in the different books. And this is category number 1. Category number 2 is these static variables or class variable. By the way, category number 1 is also non-static variable. All of these are the same, and these are the same. So in my question minutes ago, my question was, how many class variables do I have in the class student? And the point is, class variable, static variable. How many class variables, also known as static variables, do I have in the class student? And the answer is 0. Why? Because even though I have these 2 variables, name and final grade, they are not static. So that is the reason, because the answer that I was looking for is like 0. There are not static variables. There are not class variables there. And the point in which I mentioned this is tricky is because when we talk about class variables, we are not talking about all the variables inside of the class. Class variables are the static ones. In this case, this class have two variables. Those two variables are non-static variables or instance variables or object variables, but this class has 0 class variables. Class variables, static variables. Make sense? Yep. Good. So just be careful, and this is something that I mentioned because it's tricky. Just be careful with the names. Class variable versus variables in or inside the class. It's like, looks like similar, but this is talking about the static ones, and this is talking about, well, any variable inside of the class, any global variable. Good. Any other question, guys? Good. So see you tomorrow, guys. Thank you. Someone have a private question? You can stay with me in the chat, or you want to send me an email. Any option is okay. I need to talk about protected. It's coming with private. Okay. Okay, guys, thank you. I am going to stay here in the chat to talk with one of your classmates, but the class is over. Thank you.